Thanks, Mary, whom I've known for a lot longer than she's worked here, because one time she was in a different independent school, and so we have a long friendship, and she does a great job. We're lucky to have her here. Gave this talk a title, not consulting me, by the way, so which is fine. So, but that sort of sets an agenda, and so I beautifully tried to address the topics that are enumerated in the title, which is communicating with adolescent boys, helping boys adapt and manage negative emotion and awareness of red flag behaviors. So I'm just going to try to hit some high points and give you just a little overview of how I think of kids, and a lot of this applies to girls too, but there are some specific items associated with guys. And so we'll talk just a little bit of background. We'll talk about communication strategies, because that's part of the agenda. I'll talk about some red flag risk factors and what to watch out for, and hope to accomplish all that in absolutely no more than half of the allotted time, so that we can then open up for discussion. I think that ultimately for this would be most useful to everybody. Best if our discussion is driven by what your concerns are, not by what my a priori agenda might be. So I'm very eager to learn of your concerns in the second part of this event. So, having said all that, talking just a little bit in overview terms about kids and child and adolescent development. There are many processes in nature that are kind of gradual, incremental processes. Child development is not one of them, although there are gradual and incremental aspects of child development, which incidentally goes on into the 20s from a biological standpoint. The development is characterized by sudden metamorphic bursts in very rapid changes. It just consider puberty, which you have an 8th child, and then hormones hit, and very quickly, within months, you get a transformative biological set of events. And cognitive and emotional development proceed in similar fashion. Piaget talked about this in cognitive terms, going from sensory motor functioning at very early ages to concrete operational functioning in sort of elementary ages, and then up into what he referred to as formal operations, which have to do more with abstraction and being able to reason outside of oneself in adolescence. And the emotional developmental aspects sort of parallel that, we hope, anyway. So the interesting, of course, in terms of middle school, upper school age kids, adolescents, this is the age when a lot of things obviously are changing biologically, from a cognitive standpoint, from an emotional standpoint. And so these metamorphic changes, almost think of it biologically as going from pupa to larva to adulthood. It's the same organism, but there really are qualitative, not just quantitative, qualitatively structural changes that occur. And these present challenges, when sometimes your sweet little, cuddle buddy becomes, a raving maniac. But also the opposite can happen, where a kid can reach a new plateau of understanding of reasonableness. It can go in a lot of different directions. And a corollary of that process is that in this stage of early to mid-adolescence, kids are forming social identities. And by the time they come out of middle school into upper school, they're already typically making group identifications, sort of self-definitions. Am I an athlete? Am I a scholar? Am I a druggie? Am I a dropout? Am I a skater? Am I a rebel? Am I a conformist? Where do I fit in with my social group? Am I a winner? Am I a loser? Am I a leader? Am I a follower? So on and so forth. How am I doing with the girls? These aspects of identity are crystallizing just in this sort of early adolescent state. So this presents obviously a lot of challenges and a lot of pressure, also a lot of opportunities from a parenting standpoint, because it is at those times of maximal change and from a mathematical standpoint, points of inflection, when the opportunity exists for parental and community inputs to significantly impact the trajectory of those dramatic changes. So in other words, there could be repeated parental messages, one sort or another, lessons given to the kid, which essentially bounce off over time, bounce off, and then, but at the point of maximal change, at the point of metamorphic change, there is greater opportunity to incorporate new learning and new paradigms into the transformative process. These present opportunities for greater parental leverage because the kid is going through so much change. Think of it in terms of growing plants, which requires all kinds of nurturing and so on. But when the plant is growing in your spring garden more rapidly, you can train it to go in one direction or the other more readily because it's putting on more growth. So there's more material to work with in terms of molding or guiding in a certain direction. That's pretty well analogous to these points of inflection in child development. So a lot of risks for going the wrong way, opportunities for going the right way. Our kids experience a lot of pressure. Every kid needs to have a sense of at least one area in which he's able to feel good about himself, proud of himself, an area where he feels he can excel. It's less important as to what that is than it be something, than that it is something. The kids get a lot of ego gratification from being good athletes. It's a high value among boys, maybe an overvalue, but nevertheless it's part of the lingua franca of childhood and adolescence, and certainly in this community, it's a big item, and it's an area where the hierarchical pecking order is substantially laid down many times for boys, and increasingly for girls. Some kids get their ego gratification from their academic prowess. Some kids are into the arts, and so on. Many of the kids, in terms of the private school community, are highly programmed. They're not only under academic pressure, because this is a demanding academic environment, but there are social pressures, athletic pressures, and high expectations. It's an interesting thing in testing and evaluating many kids. We develop a kind of internal database. What's the average IQ defined as nationally? 100. That's by definition the average IQ. In this community, the average IQ is at least 15 to 20 times higher than that. A lot of kids, when we see them, feel they're average, and in this community, they might be average, but they're not average on a national scale. So there's a bias. In other words, if you're above average, you're only average. And that is an inherent pressure. Other pressures, of course, involve things like romantic involvements and kids trying to get a sense of where they fit in with that. I won't belabor the whole substance abuse issue because I know that's been handled previously, but can't really understate the significance of that factor in not just this community, but that's a national thing. Probably 80% of the kids are dabbling in some substance, and the pressures to do so are enormous. We'll circle back to that a little later. Boys, in particular, suffer from testosterone poisoning at this point. It makes them crazy. So here's the thing about being busy, other than sublimating, horniness. I worry about the kids who are not busy, because going back to the notion that a kid needs to have a sense of self positive sense of self in some domain. The kid who is taking challenging classes, playing on a team, singing in the choir, he's in the school play, involved in the church group, or, et cetera, et cetera. Kids are heavily programmed. As long as they're still getting enough sleep and not super stressed out, I'm happy to see that. Kids who don't have much else going on besides just going to school are more worrisome, actually, because they have a lot of time on their hands. Those are the kids who tend to get in more trouble with things like drugs and alcohol, because they're not busy enough with other things. When I ask a well-adjusted kid, what do you do when you're bored? I read a book, I shoot some hoop, I shoot across with my buddy, I practice my trumpet. Other kids, what do you do when you're bored? I get high. What do you do when you're angry? I get high. What do you do when you're with buddies? We get high. Big difference, you see both. So a lot of opportunities, a lot of pressures. So let's talk a bit about how some hints, some suggestions for how to communicate, interact, and encourage the right sort of directions in these guys. First of all, it's a cliche, but it turns out to be pretty much true. Boys tend to be more about action than talk. I think that these these culturally driven gender differences have melted down a little bit, but there's still something to that. Boys tend to be acculturated to avoid discussion of emotions and vulnerability. Show that you're vulnerable, you're weak, that's not acceptable. And many times kids are averse to sharing things with their parents, to talk to their parents. They might talk to somebody else. One of my favorite personal stories was my son who, something came up at the very beginning of, end of elementary, beginning of middle school, something about human sexuality. Here, what I do for a living, so I said, okay, Dad, anytime you want to discuss that stuff, just talk with me. He said, I would never discuss that with you. Thanks. But he was in the know, and he talked with other people, and not you. So one interesting hint is sometimes there are other adults with whom the kid is more comfortable to be. A family member, a teacher, a parent, a friend. A lot of times that's an open channel. If there's some back channel communication among parents, that's not a bad thing. You're allowed to do that. It's not a confidential relationship as long as you're careful not to poison the communication channel. It's important to catch kids being good. It's easy to catch them being bad, but it's important to catch them being good and give them recognition for jobs well done, even part way. St. here, one of the scholars many years ago talked about a ratio between negative and positive interactions in relationship with kids. As parents, we have to set kids straight, we set limits, and we wrap them across the knuckles sometimes, figuratively speaking. But that goes better if the negative interactions are outnumbered by a ratio of something on the order of 4 to 1. That's just a bit of an arbitrary number. But if the number of negative interactions is greatly outnumbered by the number of positive interactions. And so in order to accomplish that, one has to sometimes seek opportunities and without being too patronizing or sickly sweet about it. Catch the kid being good, give them recognition when you can, because that's putting money in the bank for when you have to crack the whip. In the psychology, there's something called the inverted U curve. Let me see if I have a bigger copy. Yeah, it's a pretty simple thing. I'm just going to show you the curve. Okay, this is the inverted U. It's a classic curve in performance psychology. So let me explain what this means. On the vertical axis is performance, achievement, how well the person is doing. On the horizontal axis is what's called emotional arousal, but you could also call it motivation or anxiety or pressure. So if there's no emotional arousal, no anxiety, no pressure, no motivation, you don't get much performance, of course. So as these motivating, energizing kinds of internal states decrease, sometimes due to external pressures, such as parental exhortation, the rest of you not getting grades, etc., or incentive for getting good ones, performance goes up to a point. Beyond that optimal point, with increasing arousal, increasing anxiety, increasing pressure, performance actually begins to decline. So this becomes over here the zone of diminishing returns when there's too much pressure. And that it can decline because health declines, sleep declines, emotional comfort becomes so compromised that things actually go downhill. So then, what is the obvious place to perform? If this is the peak, is that the place where you should be pushing your kid to be? The answer is no. You actually want the kid about over here, just a wee bit to the left. Why? Consider your car. If you are driving with the foot all the way to the floor on the gas pedal, constantly, the car will go as fast as it possibly can, but it can't sustain that. Eventually somebody's going to burn out or blow. You cannot perform at peak level as long as you can perform at slightly off peak level. So over here, if on your math test that's 100, and that's a 98, and to achieve the 98, the kid can get an extra hour of sleep at night. Over time, the kid is healthier, and in the long run, it's a better place to be. So there's a level of pressure beyond which one doesn't want to go. Now, there's one of my favorite things to share with parents is the inverted curve. And what this is, so now there's an x-axis here, and the y-axis is here. And this is now the child's age. So going from 0 to about 30. And on the y-axis is parental IQ. Right? So you start out pretty smart, but by around about now, you're an idiot. And eventually, you're going to get smart again. Just something to contemplate. Okay, so how to cut through some of that? First of all, never stop trying. Kids really do want your feedback, but they need you to listen. And they need you to listen reflectively and actively and not so judgmentally. Now, it's very interesting, a good rule of thumb, look at your kid when you're talking, make eye contact, really try to make connections and don't interrupt. Let them really say what they want to say if they're willing to do that. Watch your tone of voice, control your emotions. Kid says something revolting, try not to show how revolted you are until the whole story comes out, and ask for clarification and be creative in terms of trying to respond in a constructive manner. Ask questions that go beyond yes, no. How's school today? Fine. Did you do nothing? And they think, okay, yeah. Goes nowhere. So there, more content-oriented questions might be more beneficial. It's important to grab opportunities. Again, remember, boys tend to be more about action. You might be more likely to get something out of the guy, on the tennis court or walking the dog than sitting around having a heart-to-heart with the boy. Girls are better at that. Some guys are okay, and a lot of them aren't. It's an interesting point about eye contact. Although it's a valid point, because in terms of just kids knowing that you're attuned to him. But as a side note, seeing children in my practice mostly, I see kids from about 18 months right up. I have one patient who's 78. I tell him he's my oldest pediatric patient. But I actually literally see kids from 18 months up. And with each child, one has to attune oneself to where that child is. I'm not going to sit with an 18-month-old and have some long exposition about their Oedipal complex and Freudian terms. Not that I'm Freudian, but in any event, you know, with a 3-year-old girl that I saw yesterday, I'm on the floor playing Barbie dolls. Why? Not because I love Barbie dolls, but because that's where that kid is. With a 12-year-old boy, I might be on the computer playing some computer game. And, you know, as the kids get older, they actually, you know, become more capable of having real, you know, more adult executive discussion depending on the kid. But what I was going to say about eye contact is this. Many of our boys, because they spend a lot of time on the video game thing, and so here's my buddy, and here am I, and we're both like this together, right? They are very much accustomed to the side-by-side interaction where they don't look at each other. It's a common social configuration. So eye contact, yeah, but it's also okay if you sort of, both of you focused on something else. For some guys, it loosens them up. They can't do the face-to-face thing. They're much better in the side-by-side parallel. So the bottom line is to grab opportunities for conversation when you can. An interesting set of studies that somebody did, and I've forgotten who, but there are findings that families that have family meals have kids with better emotional outcomes. This may sound common sense. I mean, it does seem common sense, but there are a lot of families who don't have family meals. Everybody grabs a bowl of chili and goes to his or her respective video screen, and they just don't interact. Family mealtime is a good tradition. Obviously can't be every day when you have a cross practice and you have to be at some other event, but if that can happen on somewhat a regular basis, it goes well, and particularly if it doesn't turn into a stanching position for the kids, but just an opportunity for give and take. Another valuable point is that parents, the kids model their communication style on, to some degree, what their parents do. It's fine to share your own life experiences, even some that don't cast you in the most glowing light, as long as you're careful, and they don't need to know every gory detail about your youth. But kids respond well to parental disclosure of their own challenges in a measured manner, and doing that in a constructive way is good modeling for the kid to mirror back to you in personal communication. It's important to let kids know they come to you with any problem and try not to overreact if it's something worrisome, but to keep the door open. And even if they know that you may not approve of everything, you'll always love them, and you're going to be there to support them, and if they need help with something, we'll deal with it. Keep your antenna active for signals that the kid wants to talk, might be wanting to tell you something, but is self-conscious or frightened, doesn't know how to start, inhibited. Sometimes they give you code messages. They ask about a friend, right? Or they ask about your own youth, or they leave a note or an open journal or a magazine article on some topic conspicuously obvious, or some other item that is a hint that you're supposed to pick up on, even though they can't verbally tell you what's on their mind. If it's too uncomfortable to talk about it, you can open. These kids are constantly on their devices anyway. I guess we all are. Sometimes an email correspondence between parent and kid is more effective, or texting. You can text them across the room. It's for some kids a more comfortable mode of communication. They're doing it anyway. Incidentally, I saw a kid a couple months ago whose parents took away his text. He was doing 20,000 texts per month. Just as compulsive. If you joined in, it could be 20,000 in one. But they're living their lives on these devices. Might as well jump in if the opportunity exists. So those are some thoughts about communication. There's also the question of communication among parents. You know, the party is always where the parents aren't, as you probably noticed. We're never going to have an ironclad set of mechanisms to keep these kids from sinning or straying or experimenting or you know, doing silly things or dangerous things sometimes. But some good can come of parental communications. So there's nothing wrong with the fact that I strongly support the notion of you know, not only you're knowing where the kid is, and that's easier and easier with portable communication devices, cell phones, etc. But it's really fine and preferable for you to know that, you know, to have communication with the parents. If the kid is going to some other home, it's perfectly fine for you to be in touch with those other parents to make sure that there's some supervision. Now, as the kids get older, this becomes less and less practical and probably less and less appropriate. If your kid is a senior in high school now, guess what? In 6 months, he's in the dorm somewhere, and you know that's a jumping off point. And obviously, there has to be a transition from close parental supervision to hands off and hope and pray that nothing horrible happens. But coming through mid-adolescence, it is perfectly appropriate to be more rather than less on top of knowing where the kid is, who he's with, and what parental supervision is there. And if your kid thinks you're being the one Nazi in the group, that can be ameliorated significantly if everybody's doing it. So if the community comes together, community parents come together and maintains open channels so that you, as a community, know where the kids are, that gives you all some solidarity to present a more united front and a more controlled potential environment. Not a perfectly controlled one, but an improved sense of control and safety for these kids, because there sure are a lot of risks out there. I cannot tell you how many kids in this age group we see who are not just smoking weed every day and drinking to great excess, but using heavier drugs and dabbling with all kinds of other dangerous and scary behaviors. I'm not obviously hoping and praying that that's not true for most of your kids, but statistically, it's going to be true for some of them, and it's insidious. And so, the best we can do as a community is to have parents kind of close ranks, circle the wagons, and act as a community of parents for all of the kids. What to watch out for, red flags. So these are kind of cliches, but they're true. I mean, the most common problems that present themselves in an office like ours in kids are depression, anxiety disorders, substance use, and learning problems, academic performance problems of various sorts. In childhood psychopathology, we talk about kids who are internalizers and kids who are externalizers. So the internalizer is the kid who's quietly suffering, depressed, anxious, tummy ache, headache, worrying, not causing trouble for others, but internally in discomfort. Those kids often get less attention from the adults because they're not causing trouble in the environment. The externalizer, the kid who's disruptive, violating rules, breaking curfew, aggressive, sometimes acting out. Those kids are not so often, well, they may also be experiencing internal discomfort, but they are creating discomfort in the environment. They export their discomfort to others. And so, as a result, they gain more attention from the adults. Those are the kids more often referred in for services because they're causing a disturbance. And of course, many kids who have difficulties have a blend of externalizing and internalizing troubles. But so it's not hard to spot the externalizer. You know that you have an externalizing kid if you do. But the internalizing kid is sometimes harder to spot. So what does one watch for? Changes in sleep patterns, changing in eating patterns, weight gain, weight loss, radical change in social behavior, radical change in social choices and social groups, increased anger, obvious mood changes, kid looking down. Also, of course, rule violations, a significant change in the pattern of compliance. Sometimes declining grades, decline in cognitive function, like kids more forgetful, more distracted. These can all be signs of all kinds of issues. Can be undiagnosed learning, intentional problems, can be depression, anxiety, substance use. These are not specifically diagnostic of any one condition. They are as broad indicators that there's something in this. And so if there's a significant presentation of that kind of picture, that it's time to try to enter into a dialogue with the kid and/or consult with school counseling people, consult with kids' pediatrician, refer in for mental health, talk to some trusted person, and try to proceed with some kind of intervention or at least evaluation to try to know what's cooking. That sort of concludes my prepared comments. Time for discussion.
I have a question about sleep. What is the recommended, is there a different amount that's ideal for middle school versus high school? Or, what's the minimum they should be getting versus maximum?
Yeah, well, it does vary, of course, from individual to individual. There are a lot of adolescents who need 10 hours of sleep a night. Most of them don't get it. 8 is minimal. A lot of our kids are getting 6. And then they're walking through the day exhausted. Some of them will come home after school or after practice and have a nap. They're using caffeine and energy drinks to boost themselves up. Not to mention that about 10% of our kids are prescribed stimulant medications for ADHD, which are, they tend to keep you awake. And so there's an interesting question. What is the incidence of sleep disorder misdiagnosed as ADHD, and then it's masked by the fact that waking up with an upper. This isn't to say that there's no such thing as ADHD, but we have a lot of patients in our practice who are so diagnosed and medicated appropriately. But there are a lot of factors that interfere. The time pressures associated with homework and all the other obligations these kids have are chief among them, and they want time for socialization. It's merciful that private schools locally tend to start a little later at high school level than public schools. They start at 7 a.m. A lot of these public school kids, high school kids, are up late, and then they have to be up at 5:30 in the morning. They're just exhausted. But we see that, here as well. So, short answer is up to 10 hours. And the longer answer is, good luck trying to get that, it just doesn't fit. Yeah.
What are your suggestions for bringing boys or even later adolescent boys sort of back to a daytime schedule? I find that as my boys age, they're working maybe at night, they're studying late, they're socializing late because of their gaming. Sometimes that happens later. They begin to sort of leave the rest of the family in terms of when they're sleeping and when they're waking.
Right, even during the school week?
No.
More on weekends?
More on weekends.
Yeah.
But then they have to catch up during the school week.
Right, ideally, from just a biological rhythm standpoint, we do best when we maintain a very steady routine 7 days a week. Another fictional concept, with kids. Realistically, who doesn't want to stay up a little later on Saturday night? But there's a difference between staying up till midnight and staying up till 4 a.m. So I think that the modern view is to give them some latitude on the weekends, but try to hold the line at some reasonable hour, appealing to just kind of good, what we call good sleep hygiene. They may think you're down at the bottom of that. But that's the ideal thing to do. I mean, we sometimes see individuals who have a completely inverted sleep cycle. They're going to sleep at before 5 a.m. and they're up they get up at 2 p.m. They're just totally out of sync with the rest of the world. And you know, it's very distressing because you know, sleep and mood are intimately connected. And so when the sleep, when mood is, I mean, it's a person with depression or manic and any kind of mood disturbance tends to have a sleep disturbance. But the flip side of that is that the disrupted sleep cycle can drive mood problems. So, you know, other than, you know, an electric cattle prod and a whip at 1 a.m. on a Saturday night, I mean, that, you know, basic recommendation is to try to, you know, be a benevolent tyrant and impose a reasonable nighttime, you know, bedtime, even on the weekends, giving them some flexibility so that they can maintain some semblance of a rhythm. With people who have a really inverted cycle, sometimes will, then there are interventions for sleep disorders where you actually do things like pushing the bedtime ahead an hour every night until they finally reset. And that's the kind of thing that's done in therapy work with people with really badly distorted sleep cycle. I think you're alluding to a weekend problem. Yeah.
Well, this kind of ties in. Is there a ratio, like if your child goes to bed at 9 o'clock during the week, what time limit should be tied to that? Like, should you then bump it to like 11 on the weekend? Like, how do you moderate that?
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I mean, you know, obviously, the greater the deviation, the more distorted from a body clock standpoint, right? So, you know, I cannot cite for you formal literature on that. There may be some, I just am not aware of it. It's an interesting question. But yeah, you would think, I mean, 2 hours is not an unreasonable deviation. You know, intuitively, the numbers you just gave seem about right. 11 o'clock, though, on a Saturday night is socially an early time. And you know, you don't want your kid to be the one weirdo who can't stay at the bowling party. You know, that doesn't do good. So, you know, you can catch up on sleep somewhat. And, another compromise is, okay, you can have one significantly late night on the weekend. You can't have two.
And would it be better to have it on Friday versus Saturday?
Better, yes, because then it gives you a longer recovery time. But we have, you know, one needs to be sensitive to the social demands as well. So
because it's almost like jet lag.
it is like, of course it is. It's exactly like that. Yeah.
I have a freshman boy who, for the last year, I would say, has really pushed away from me more than anybody else in the family. Definitely. Can you tell me anything that'll make me take that a little less personally?
Other than that you're at the bottom of that curve?
My husband is not.
Right.
My husband, it's mom, it's just.
Yeah. Well, obviously, without getting into the, you know, the specific dynamics of your situation, you know, which may be where one would have to look. Yeah, I mean, we all become idiots at some point, and we hope that it's a temporary status.
But is it more so for the mother?
Can be. Yeah. Can be.
I'm still taking it personally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, other than looking at, you know, is there, you know, is there some pattern that you can rectify? I mean, it may really not be anything to do with you whatsoever. And, you know, it's hard not to personalize, but try not to.
So as a primary caregiver, if the mom is the primary caregiver and is also at the lowest of the curve, how do you balance? I mean, what do you do? Because you have no credibility, you have no leverage. Well, I guess maybe you do have leverage. What do you? How do they balance that?
Tough. That's difficult. You know, you try to open the channels, you try to, you know, create opportunities, you know, activities with the kid if the kid will engage. Pull in a third party if the other parent has, you know, higher, that stock value is higher. Pull that parent in to more three-way communications. Get some counseling. You know, hold the line on behavioral expectations. You know, it's tough to generalize because there's so many variants. But, you know, don't give up. Keep trying. Choose your battles. Hold the line. Pray.
I think it's all that is you're only as happy as your most unhappiest child. So, you know, if you got a kid and you know they're at the bottom, they think we're at the bottom, then you are the frowny face.
Right.
You know, so there you go. But you know, I think you pointed out about talking about the norms and are you seeing changes in the behavior and the pattern? So, you know, I think that's critical.
Right. Yeah.
My observation, it's an observation and question, is there's a difference between girls and boys in terms of emotional maturity. And through my daughter, she's 17, my son is 18. My daughter has continued to be open and want me and interaction with me. But my son, and I think speaking to your point, and I've observed that I went through it with my girlfriend's boys, and I interviewed them a couple of years ago and simply asked, is your mother just a service provider? No, she's not in charge. I mean, really? And I said, just answer me straight, because Hunter's coming up, and I want to know, is this just all you need from her is just service? And he said, yeah, pretty much. And it was not a, I hate my mom, it's just, we're service. I mean, it's a service provider, and there's not the emotional energy. He's still the center of his world, and it seems like there's at that age, and I'm wondering if this is the question, and because boys mature later, if they're not able maybe to look around, they're not as empathetic because the world still focuses in on them. And girls seem to, my daughter's very empathetic and she's sort of touchy-feely with everybody, but yet boys come out of that at some point. They realize, oh, you know, Mom, you're great. But my sense for me is I am strictly a service provider, and when I accept that that's what he loves me, it's great, you know, it's fine, but he doesn't need me the way my daughter does. I take it much less personally, although there are times when he's pounding around with Dad, and, you know, I'm like, well, gee, isn't that fun? But I don't know. I don't want to go stand outside in the rain and watch, you know, Navy soccer or whatever it is. I don't do it. But it is a little easier because they really don't need or want, but certainly with the girl.
Well,
And at what point do they?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And, you know, it really is hard to find good service.
I've read a wonderful book about boys and boy development, and it indicated that at about a middle school age, boys are naturally pulling away from their mothers because we mother them. They're trying to establish themselves as young men, and so they need some sort of significant milestone in their life, either athletically or academically or sexually, or, you know, they've got their driver's license or something where they have set themselves and they feel like, yeah, okay, I've made it, and Mommy hugging me and holding my hand is not going to be an embarrassment to me or hold me back in any way. And they always come back. They always come back to the moms. They gave an example of a young man on the battlefield, you know, sending a video tribute to his mother. They always send a tribute to their mother. Usually not their dads. I mean, they love their dads, but they always come back once they have kind of made it in their own minds.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. It goes back to this question of personalization that, you know, they do need to make that emotional break. It's part of growing up to be able to sort of sever a certain tie before you can reinvent it at a more mature level. And if they can't do that, then they're emotionally stunted. But with some kids, it's just a more painful process. Yeah.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sam Straub, and I'm the upper school counselor. And one of the things that I say to parents is, if kids save their worst for you, then they're supposed to, because it's really hard work to wear the school mask all day long and be who everybody else expects of them, socially. So they just let all their ugly stuff hang out at home, and that includes being real jerks to you because they know it's safe and they can like just let that out and they know you're not going anywhere. So when I say to parent, you know, what you're saying is really quite common, look at who they are not in your house, because that's a reflection of the job you're doing as a parent. Look at how they keep it together when they aren't letting the ugly stuff hang out, because if all's going well in that front, your kid's probably doing okay.
I'd like to add that my boys are 24, 22, 13. And they all went through that process. My 13-year-old is in that process now. Dad is just fun. You know, they have a lot more things in common. He wants to go out to dinner with Dad, not Mom. That's not cool. But also what I find is when the boys have something really serious they want to talk about, it's me. I'm on the phone with them. They're, you know, Jason loves to talk in the morning or at bedtime at 9 o'clock. It's like, oh, let's talk. But I think that's very natural. And I remember feeling, oh, you know, what about me? But that's where they were. They come back.
As long as they come back. Eventually.
We'll bring you over.
Any other,
Yeah, I have a son, you talk about, you know, they wear the school mask all day and they, and then they come home and they let it all hang out. I have a very internalizing child who, when he gets home, he doesn't say anything. So he'll, if something goes wrong and I have it out with him, he still doesn't say anything and his eyes will well up and he still won't say anything. So what are some ideas to kind of get him to just, I mean, I'm waiting for one day for him to just lose it, and then I'll feel like, okay, I finally got through.
Yeah.
Like, most days I think, okay, did you hear anything I just said?
So, again, without getting into too much clinical questioning,
Right.
you know, as to what might be cooking with him, is there some other communication channel that he uses? Does he text with his friends? Does he talk to anybody?
He texts with his, I mean, he's 12, so he texts with his friends, but it's very, I've read most of them, and it's very superficial,
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah. Well, you know, he may just not be ready to talk about it, may not even know what it is.
Right.
Keep your ear to the ground and, you know, so use this more as just a hypothetical example as opposed to a discussion of your kid in a public forum, but you know, kids' eyes are welling up and he's not talking about things. It makes you at least wonder a bit about some kind of depression going on or something along those lines, or at least something bugging him. And so then that's where we watch for these other potential indicators. Is there a sleep disturbance? Is he not eating well? Is he withdrawing from friends? Are the grades going down? You know, are there outbursts? Are there other signs of something really amiss? If the answer is no, if he's actually functioning well in all those domains, then you know it's of less concern. It's just for some reason he's bottled up and he's not ready or able to find the words or to, you know, for some other reason to communicate about it. I hope that that'll change. Give him the opportunity. Shoot him an email, shoot him a text. Driving in the car, maybe you get it, you know, get him at a more receptive moment and just monitor, you know, and maybe he'll sort of metamorphose at two different levels if you give him the opportunity. On the other hand, if he becomes more symptomatic in the other sense, then maybe it's time to get him to see somebody who might be able to, you know, pry things loose in a different context. Or the other thing is there may be some other trusted adult, you know, could be, you know, another, you know, as I was saying earlier, another parent. Sometimes kids won't talk to their own parents, but they'll spill it to their friend's parent or somebody else. Yeah.
I want to reiterate what Sam said. I have 4 boys. They go from 23 to 13, and I was in terrible habit when I picked them up from school conducting the Spanish Inquisition because I wanted to know everything about their day. I have 2 that are very high achieving, and a youngest who is looking up to his brothers going, will I ever get there? And it finally occurred to me, you know, I fail motherhood on a daily basis, that I was really putting him on the spot and in an uncomfortable situation, listening to his brothers get in the car and say, I got a 98 on my honors quiz today and a 100 on my AP, and the little one's sitting there going, and I got a D on my science test, aren't I great? They are so on all day that I have really had to train myself in the car to talk about, the daffodils are blooming, isn't it lovely out today? But it really has made a huge, huge difference, especially with the youngest. He now feels more comfortable opening up, but looks for that private time when he's not in front of his brothers. And when he's ready to take off that mask of the day, that high performance, high achieving, perfect child. And it really, I have to remind myself every time I turn into this driveway to not ask anything about their day.
It's true. I mean, this is a high achieving community. And, you know, one of the things, I mean, if you think about private school, independent school, I mean, obviously the educational standards are high. You know what, you can get high educational standards in the public schools at the higher level classes. But what you get, and I'm speaking as a dad whose kids went private straight through, so I'm sort of preaching, I know I'm preaching to the choir, and a member of the choir. But a lot of what you get with a private school is community. You're buying into a community. You're electing a community for your family. It's not just the kids, but actually, you know, as you I'm sure know, you know, your kids tend to drive a lot of parental, social, family, social life, and it really is a school community. And so you can make a choice of which of those communities you would like to go into. This community, this is a great community, but it's a very achieving community. It's a high pressure, high expectation, high achievement group, and that's great. But it puts our kids under a good bit of pressure, and so you know, I think the daffodils is a good counterpoint to that. Over here.
I guess I wanted to know if you could comment on the role of older siblings. We've heard a lot about kids going to other adults and whatnot, but older siblings, I'm noticing as I'm getting to that bottom of the curve, that I hear from my daughter who's on college sometimes some things, and it seems like some communication is going out. And I just was wondering if you could comment on the siblings.
Well, I can cut either way, right? But if you have an intact older sibling, that youngster can have the impact that you can't have right, if there's a relationship. But it can also cut the other way if that person, the older sibling, is sort of reminding. But I think on the whole, having an older sibling to look up to and to confide in, that can sometimes be the confidant for the older sibling. That gives a lot of benefit. And being the older sibling gives a mentoring opportunity. So, siblings in general are instructive presence. Not always.
Tony, please, if you, as a parent, find yourself in that position where your younger, in this case probably son, is confiding in an older sibling, what are your thoughts on addressing that dynamic directly with the older sibling, saying something to the effect of, I think it's great that you guys have this relationship, I see it getting closer, I see him confiding in you, let's talk about some parameters in terms of what I absolutely have to know about.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's, if it's too obvious, obviously you can kill the communication, right?
Yeah.
Kill the trust. I mean, it's not unlike when we do therapy with a middle school kid, for example. If Johnny thinks that everything he tells me is going to just be, played back to mom, we're dead. On the other hand, there is no confidential relationship between child and the doctor, the professional. The confidential relationship, the contract is between the parent and the provider. So, but there still has to, the kid still has to have a sense of privacy. So, we would typically say, look, what you say to me is private. But if I learn that you're in real danger, or you're being abused, or you're doing something potentially harmful to yourself, then I have to discuss with the parents. And I think That's kind of analogous, with the older sibling, to say, look, it's great you guys have a good relationship, and I don't have to know what goes on, but please do let me know quite privately and quietly if there's something that really needs my attention. I think that's absolutely kosher and appropriate. I guess we're about 15, one more.
Just very quickly, I want to say that one thing that was very, very useful to me in interacting with my children is, how am I showing up that you're drooping your shoulders? How am I showing up that your eyes are now lighting up in my interaction with you? How am I showing up? And when I started paying attention to that, it's very useful. I have now had an opportunity to be switched.
We just want to comment real quick too on embracing the texting. Even it's some of the best way to communicate with the kids. Even when I need chores done, I could yell, I need a dishwasher, I was like 16 times. But if I send the text, it's time to the
You have to meet them where they are. You have to meet them where they are. Not trying to meet them where you are.
Right.
All right.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it. Will, oh yeah, well, Dr. Wolf will, we have cards if you are interested in his practice spectrum. It's dynamic. They've got most of anything that someone would need over there. That's also a good way to get in touch with you if you've got further
Right.
questions.
I didn't actually write up these notes, but anybody who has any questions, just grab a card and give me a call.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you so much.